Pedro Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, is one of the most chilling figures in criminal history. Lopez is believed to have murdered over 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. His story is a haunting tale of brutality and horror. Lopez's moniker aptly describes the monstrosity of his actions. As we explore the life and crimes of Pedro Lopez, we will journey through the darkness of his early years, understand the methods behind his madness, and uncover the aftermath of his reign of terror. This tale is not for the faint-hearted, but it is a story that needs to be told. Pedro Lopez was born on October 8, 1948, in the small town of Santa Isabel, Colombia. This picturesque town, nestled in the heart of Colombia, would soon become the backdrop for a life filled with unimaginable hardship. His early years were fraught with hardship and neglect, setting the stage for the monster he would become. Growing up in a poverty-stricken neighborhood, Pedro was often left to fend for himself, wandering the dusty streets alone. His mother, a prostitute, often beat him and exposed him to a world of violence and abuse. The constant exposure to such brutality left deep scars on young Pedro, who had no safe haven to escape to. Lopez's father, a member of the Colombian Conservative Party, was killed in a civil war before Pedro was even born. This loss left a void in his life, depriving him of a paternal figure and further destabilizing his already tumultuous upbringing. At the tender age of 8, Pedro was caught fondling his younger sister and was subsequently thrown out of the house. This act of desperation and confusion marked the beginning of his life on the streets. Homeless and vulnerable, he was soon picked up by a man who promised him food and shelter only to sexually assault him. This traumatic experience was just the first of many betrayals that would shape his twisted psyche. This betrayal and violence became a pattern in Lopez's life, further warping his psyche. Each encounter with cruelty and abuse pushed him further into a dark abyss, setting the stage for the horrors he would later commit. The cycle of violence and neglect that began in his early years would haunt him for the rest of his life, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Pedro Lopez's descent into darkness began in earnest during his teenage years. By the time he was 18, he had already committed his first murder. Lopez targeted young girls, often between the ages of 8 and 12. He would lure them away with promises of toys or sweets, gaining their trust before leading them to their doom. Once he had isolated his victims, Lopez's true nature emerged. He moved frequently between Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Pedro Lopez's crimes were not random acts of violence, they were carefully orchestrated attacks. He would meticulously select his targets, ensuring they were vulnerable and unsuspecting. Lopez often preyed on girls from poor families, knowing they were less likely to attract immediate attention if they went missing. He exploited the trust of these children, using his charisma to lure them away from safety. Once he had gained the trust of his victim, Lopez would lead them to a secluded location. He would sexually assault the girls before strangling them. The cold, calculated nature of his crimes is what makes Lopez's story so chilling. Section 5. Victims and their stories. The victims of Pedro Lopez were innocent young girls, their lives cut tragically short. These young souls, full of dreams and aspirations, were robbed of their futures in the most horrific manner. Each one had a story, a family, and a future that was brutally stolen from them. Their families, left in the wake of such tragedy, are forever haunted by the memories of their lost loved ones. One such victim was Maria, a 10-year-old girl from a small village in Ecuador. Maria was known for her infectious laughter and her love for playing outdoors. She was last seen playing near her home, her laughter echoing through the village. The village, once filled with the sounds of children playing, was plunged into silence and sorrow. Her family searched frantically when she didn't return, but it was too late. The community came together hoping for a miracle, but their hopes were shattered. Maria had become another statistic in Lopez's reign of terror. Her story is just one of many that highlight the devastating impact of his actions. Another victim, Isabella, was an 11-year-old who loved to draw. Her drawings were a window into her vibrant imagination and her dreams of a bright future. Her artwork, filled with bright colors and happy scenes, was a stark contrast to the dark end she met. The innocence and joy captured in her drawings now serve as a poignant reminder of what was lost. The stories of these victims are a haunting reminder of the human cost of Pedro Lopez's crimes. Each name, each face, represents a life that was full of potential, cruelly taken away. Their memories live on in the hearts of their families and communities, a testament to their short but impactful lives. Section 6. The Hunt for the Monster. The hunt for Pedro Lopez was a complex and arduous process. Authorities in Colombia, Ecuador and Peru were initially unaware that they were dealing with a single perpetrator. The breakthrough came when Lopez was arrested for attempting to abduct a young girl in Ecuador. His suspicious behavior and the subsequent investigation revealed a pattern that linked him to numerous other disappearances. Police began to connect the dots, piecing together evidence from various missing person cases. The net was closing in on Lopez. Section 7. Capture and Confessions. Pedro Lopez's capture was a moment of relief for many, but it also marked the beginning of a chilling series of confessions. The streets that once echoed with fear now held a glimmer of hope, as the man responsible for so much pain was finally in custody. Once in custody, Lopez began to reveal the full extent of his crimes. Each confession was more shocking than the last, as he recounted his actions with a disturbing level of detail. His confessions were detailed and horrifying, painting a picture of a man who had committed unspeakable acts with a disturbing sense of calm. The detectives listened in disbelief as Lopez described his heinous deeds without a hint of remorse. Lopez admitted to the murders of over 300 young girls. Each admission was a dagger to the hearts of the families who had lost their loved ones and the community that had lived in fear for so long. He described his methods and his motivations, showing no remorse for his actions. His cold and calculated demeanor left the authorities and the public in shock. Lopez led authorities to several burial sites where the remains of his victims were found. Each discovery brought a mix of sorrow and relief as families finally had answers. But the reality of the horrors was undeniable. His lack of remorse solidified his reputation as one of the most cold-blooded serial killers in history. The media coverage was relentless, and the world watched in horror as the full scope of his atrocities came to light. Section 8. Investigation and Trial. The investigation into Pedro Lopez's crimes was exhaustive. Authorities had to piece together evidence from multiple countries, dealing with the complexities of international law and jurisdiction. Despite these challenges, they built a strong case against Lopez. The trial of Pedro Lopez drew significant media attention. The evidence was overwhelming and the jury was left with little doubt about his guilt. Lopez was found guilty of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The trial concluded, but the shadow of his crimes continued to loom large. Section 9. Legacy and Impact. The legacy of Pedro Lopez is one of horror and tragedy. His crimes had a profound impact on the communities he terrorized and on the field of criminology. Lopez's ability to evade capture for so long highlighted significant gaps in the coordination between law enforcement agencies across borders. For the families of the victims, Lopez's legacy is one of enduring pain. Memorials and tributes to the victims serve as a reminder of the innocent lives lost and the importance of vigilance in protecting vulnerable populations. The insights gained from Lopez's case have contributed to the development of profiling techniques and intervention strategies aimed at preventing future crimes. Section 10. Current status and reflection. After serving 14 years in an Ecuadorian prison, he was released in 1994 for good behavior and subsequently deported to Colombia. His whereabouts since then have been largely unknown, adding a layer of mystery to his already chilling story. Rumors and unconfirmed reports have surfaced over the years, suggesting that Lopez may still be at large. The release of Pedro Lopez remains a controversial and troubling aspect of his story. It raises questions about the adequacy of the justice system in dealing with such dangerous individuals. The horrors left in his wake are a testament to the importance of justice and the need for continued efforts to understand and prevent such atrocities.